Hey everybody, this is Jonathan Whitehead from the Oracles of God YouTube channel, and as you can see before you that I will be engaging in a debate with Andrew Richardson over the number of drinking vessels to be used in the distribution of the fruit of the vine during the Lord's Supper. I appreciate your time and dedication to this series of videos, and I hope that these videos will be an aid to all those who are searching for the truth as it pertains to the Lord's Supper. The question of concern in this debate is the number of drinking vessels to be used in the distribution of the fruit of the vine during the Lord's Supper. The proposition that I have sought to affirm is before you, and you can read it on your screen. It is that the Scriptures teach that more than one container may be used while distributing the fruit of the vine. And there's a whole lot that I'd like to get to in this first speech, so let me go ahead and jump in and start defining this proposition. By the Scriptures teach, I mean that the 66 books of the Bible command us and instruct us how to ascertain Bible authority, and that all things that fall underneath the umbrella of authority, whether they be specifically mentioned or not, are taught by the Scriptures. By more than one container, I mean the multiplicity of containers, whether it be 2, 3, or 200. By may be used, I simply mean that it is certainly not necessary for a congregation to use multiple containers, but they can if they want to, that it is left up to the autonomy of the local congregation. And by distributing the fruit of the vine, I simply have reference to the Lord's Supper. Now, before I jump into my affirmative speech and start making arguments, I believe that it would be important to lay down just a few rules that we use while ascertaining Bible authority when we read the Scriptures. Rule number 1 is that all things which are authorized are either commanded or they are expedient. Rule number 2 is that if something is commanded, then it cannot be expedient. Rule number 3 is that among the expedients, the only authorized expedients are those which are lawful. Rule number 4 is that lawful expedients fall into the realm of personal opinion. And now these 4 rules will help us to realize that not everything that we do has to be specifically mentioned within the Scriptures, because in order for something to be expedient, then it cannot be specified. That is to say that the command to go, which Jesus gave us in the Great Commission, does not specify how an individual must go, and so a car would fall into the realm of expediency because it does not add to, substitute, or alter the command to go in any way whatsoever. Furthermore, songbooks. They're not specifically mentioned in the Scriptures, yet Brother Richardson and I would both sign our John Hancock to a proposition that reads that the Scriptures teach that an individual may use songbooks to aid him in his singing. And so once again, songbooks don't substitute, alter, or add to the command to sing, and so therefore they are an expedient and not an addition, because with a songbook all that you do is sing. It doesn't substitute, add, or take away from the command in any way whatsoever. Now, I'm a fair man, and I wouldn't obligate Brother Richardson to prove anything that I myself would not also have to prove if I was in his position. For instance, I would not obligate Brother Richardson to show me the book, chapter, and verse where songbooks are specifically mentioned in the Bible. While I can certainly supply passages that refer to multiple containers, it's important to note that I am not obligated to show any passage that refers to multiple containers. I don't have to give one single passage that pertains unto multiple containers any more than I have to give one single passage that mentions songbooks, or specifically mentions songbooks, in our worship services. Now, if I can demonstrate that the method of drinking from a container is expedient, then I have sustained my proposition. Another way that we can sustain my proposition is through spiritual significance. If we simply look at the text and pull out every single example that we find, then we'll realize that we've laid before ourselves an impossible burden as it pertains to the Lord's Supper. One may ask themselves, why are these things bound and why are these things not bound? And the answer is simple. Because every spiritually significant element of the Lord's Supper is bound, and every spiritually insignificant element of the Lord's Supper is loosed. So if I can demonstrate that the container has no spiritual significance, then I have proven that the container is insignificant, and that it being an insignificant element of the Lord's Supper, that it is consequently an unbound and loosed element of the Lord's Supper. But believe it or not, the negative speaker's obligation is harder than mine. His obligation is either to prove that my expedient is unlawful, or that the number of containers to be used is in some way commanded. However, if we narrow it down even further, we'll see that Brother Richardson's obligation to negate this proposition is even more difficult than that. For instance, if Brother Richardson proves that my expedient is unlawful, then he has proven that there is something intrinsically sinful about a container, and thus a container cannot be used while distributing the fruit of the vine. And that would put him in a predicament because he believes that you must use one container while distributing the fruit of the vine in the Lord's Supper. And so this leaves Brother Richardson's obligation as the negative speaker to show that the number of containers is in some way commanded. Not only must he give the book, chapter, and verse which commands us to use a container, but he must also supply the book, chapter, and verse which includes the instructions to teach us how to partake of that container, and that these instructions either include the specific prohibition of additional containers, or that the command would necessitate the use of only one container. As we head into my arguments, we must examine the institution and application of the Lord's Supper. We ought to ask ourselves, what has the Lord required for us to do? And has He given us any specific commandments as it pertains to the Lord's Supper? If He has given us any specific commandments, what are the restrictions and what are the incidentals to those commands? We know that in Luke chapter 22 and 1 Corinthians chapter 11, that the Lord commanded us to do this in remembrance of Him. But what should we do? Do what, Lord? Well, in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 26, Paul continues saying, "For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you do show the Lord's death till He comes." And also in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 24, we find the specific statement where Jesus said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And in Matthew 26:27, Jesus said concerning the fruit of the vine, "To drink ye all of it." Now, in Matthew chapter 26, verses 26 through 29, we read that Jesus took the bread and commanded them to eat. And it was a sign of spiritual significance whenever Jesus said that this is my body. Within this command, there are a number of restrictions and a number of incidentals. The restrictions pertain to that which was specifically mentioned. For instance, we have to eat the bread, and we can't drink the bread, and we can't eat the pizza instead. The incidentals to such a command would include the plate which we use to pass the bread around, so that no crumbs fall on the floor. This incidental is an expedient because it does not change, substitute, or add to the command to eat in any way whatsoever. With the plate, you still only eat the bread, and that's the point. That's what makes it an expedient. Now in the next few verses, Jesus says, "And He took the cup, and gave thanks, and gave it to them, saying, Drink ye all of it, because this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say unto you, I will not drink henceforth of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." Notice here that Jesus gives us a command which is pertaining to the fruit of the vine. He commands us here that we should drink of it, or that we should drink of the fruit of the vine, as it specifically mentions in verse 29. The restrictions to this command would include the drinking of the fruit of the vine, and so that is to say that we couldn't eat the fruit of the vine, and that we couldn't drink the milk of a cow instead, because we would be adding to and substituting the significant elements of the Lord's Supper. The incidentals in this command would include the container used to distribute the fruit of the vine. We could use 1 cup or 2 cups, because with multiple cups we still only obey the command which is to drink. We still only drink the fruit of the vine. Since these containers would not be an addition to the command, nor would they be a substitution to the command, then it must be an expedient to the command. And I hold the view that there is nothing intrinsically sinful about a drinking vessel, and so therefore I have established the fact that a drinking vessel is a lawful expedient which expedites the command to drink which Jesus gave in the Lord's Supper. But however, perhaps there's something that I've missed, and Brother Richardson can enlighten me to what that is. On this chart that you see before you, there are 2 commands that I've found as it pertains to the elements of the Lord's Supper. Number 1, eat the bread. Number 2, drink the fruit of the vine. Since Brother Richardson has denied my proposition, then he is obligated to fill in the 3rd blank and supply for us a scripture which commands us to use a drinking vessel. Then he must show us that the command instructs us how to specifically drink out of that drinking vessel, and that the method prescribed would by necessity exclude the use of multiple drinking vessels, or he must find the specific prohibition of multiple containers. It's important for us to be careful whenever we start naming elements of the Lord's Supper and giving them spiritual significance, because we can just as easily become a lawmaker as we can a lawbreaker. And I have no satisfaction whatsoever in saying that the brethren who bind the use of one container on their brethren are dividing the Lord's church, and that those who do such serve not our Lord Jesus Christ. And finally, Brother Richardson and myself have agreed to swap questions in this debate to help things go along a little bit faster and pull the points that we'd like to make out a little bit better. My questions to Brother Richardson are these. Number 1 is, what does the container picture during the Lord's Supper? Number 2, if the container were to be dropped and broken during the first half of the distribution of the fruit of the vine during the Lord's Supper, what would you do? Number 3, does the Lord's table and the table of demons refer to literal tables? 1 Corinthians 10:21. Number 4, may a congregation of the Lord's church use individual straws in order to drink out of one common container? Number 5, doesn't the cup of blessings refer to at least two containers, one being blessed at Corinth and one being blessed at Ephesus? And the scriptural reference right there is 1 Corinthians 10:16.